B2B companies, they blame the generation. There's something wrong with this generation that they don't like the phone. And I'm like, yeah, this generation was raised by you. The smartphone, video content, YouTube, this is going to be the future. And that's the skills that these kids picked up. And instead of sitting around getting angry that they don't know how to use the phone, I'm like, why don't you learn how to use a camera? And I find in B2B, oftentimes they don't do this critical section of talking to their potential users, having interviews, qualitative research. They just jump straight to like, I'll ask ChatGPT, what are the 3 most common problems that my audience has? And what do you know? Everybody winds up with the exact same value add, which is we're going to save you time and money. But it's a very surface level understanding of the problem, and comedy allows you to go somewhere deeper.
Welcome to the all-new episode of Xgrid Talks. Today we're joined by dynamic guest who wears many hats. Meet Chris, a seasoned writer, a video coach who's unique player for sales and sketch comedy. Chris is your go-to expert for mastering the art of sounding natural and playing to the top of your intelligence and camera. With a coaching style that blends sales mastery and sketch comedy, he champions an improv-based approach to content creation essays, making the process direct, supportive, and of course fun. Known for his expertise in crafting short video content that doesn't just entertain but also drives revenue, Chris is at the forefront of coaching individuals for short and impactful sales and marketing strategy. And if that wasn't impressive enough, it delivers a fresh dose of comedy every week, injecting humor into the world of sales and marketing. Without further ado, welcome, Chris. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great. Okay, let's just start. Okay, share a bit about your journey and how you discovered the power of short video in B2B marketing.
How did I discover the power of short video? I guess the easiest way I could say was it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
I never planned to be doing anything on video. Certainly did not think I was going to be a content creator. And COVID changed that. So at the time I was in a sales role. I was selling education technology to universities. And all of a sudden, I couldn't reach anybody anymore. The 3 best ways to contact universities are call them in their office, visit them on campus, or visit them at an educational conference. So overnight, nobody is in their office anymore. All the conferences are shut down. Campuses are shut down. All my flights are canceled. What am I going to do? So I started getting on video. I quickly realized that I was better at it than most everyone on my team. And it occurred to me that this is not something that is taught commonly. You go get an MBA somewhere, they're not teaching you how to make short form videos. And maybe they should. Maybe they will. My hope is that they will, because this is insanely powerful. But I noticed that they weren't. And I had no reputation on LinkedIn. I had no brand recognition. Nobody knew who I was. But I realized quickly that if I just get out there on video, I can be seen by a much larger crowd. And I didn't expect how well it would take off. And I have a couple theories as to why, but I've had a lot more time on television. So I've done a little bit of television work, which gives me more confidence in front of, a professional camera. I have a lot of friends who are very successful. They're very successful creators on YouTube and TikTok. They were doing things that I was not seeing the B2B world doing. And I also have this second background as a sketch comedian. So I spent a lot of times writing and directing comedy shows at Chicago's Second City Theater. And famously, that's where most of the cast of Saturday Night Live comes from. They learn to write sketch comedy in Chicago, then they go to New York or Los Angeles or wherever and become stars. I still live in Chicago, but I got very used to writing just kind of short, snappy stuff. I got used to directing talent and how to get a good performance out of other people. And again, these are not skills that B2B teaches. So I figured, I'll go teach it.
Yeah, so this is very, very interesting because Obviously, you never planned for this to happen, right? As an event changed all of it. So tell me, let's just go deeper. Obviously, for B2B marketing, you have this awareness stage and consideration stage and a buying stage. How would you infuse your comedy within both different stages? And what's your strategy around building content for that?
Mm-hmm. So I feel like the comedy is most important for that awareness stage. There is this conventional wisdom on LinkedIn that you need to lead with value. Don't put anything out there unless it's solving the problem. B2B buyers are serious. They only want content focused on the problem. And the issue I take with that is oftentimes people don't know what their problem is. You can go out there with a video that says, here's my top 5 cold calling tips, or here's my top 5 tips for paid search. There's a good chance that most of your audience is not on the market. And even if they should be, they probably don't understand that what they're experiencing is a problem yet. So I needed something to get in front of my network. And I discovered that comedy works really well. If you go out there with something funny, if you catch them off guard, if you surprise them a little bit, you can get them to watch. And if you get them to watch, you can get them to learn. And yeah, that was, you know, to me, it was just like, again, I was out there selling myself. I had never run a business before. I had never, done anything like this. So it's like, yeah, I needed to educate them. And I run on the Sesame Street principle. You know Sesame Street, right?
Yeah.
Sesame Street was built with this idea that if you can keep a child's attention, you can educate them. And we're really all just big kids out there on LinkedIn. And I followed the same principle. It always starts with something a little bit absurd. It starts with something a little, maybe more adult than you're expecting, maybe a little bit more humorous, maybe a little bit more honest than you're expecting. But once you're in it, you realize, oh, there's something deeper here that I wasn't expecting. You know, there's some underlying truth to it that I can identify and see within myself. And yeah, that's really the point. You're kind of loading that value. You're putting a candy coating on it that makes it easier to consume.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they're in, once they've accepted your message, then you can hit them with these more conventional routes of selling and marketing, you know, but most people don't understand they have a problem. And if you're going to get their attention, you have to employ the element of surprise somehow. And comedy is very good at surprising people for a lot of reasons.
Okay, that's great. So obviously you're suggesting that you're using it for the awareness part of things, and then based upon their interactions, you're going deeper with the very traditional stuff. Do you have any use case, anything? How would you think about building this kind of a video? What's your framework like?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm asking, obviously, you're suggesting that you build that kind of comedy from video for the awareness level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you use any framework for that? Or do you have any tips for that? Do you have any use case with us to share? We can actually understand a bit better about this.
Yeah, so the comedy framework that I learned at Second City is this idea of yes and, which means, you know, if you want to go through like a basic improv 101 kind of class, the whole concept of improv is you've got, you know, a bunch of people standing around on stage and there is nothing there. There's no set, there's no costumes, there is no script. So you have to make up everything on the spot. And the only way that's possible is with this idea of agreement. Every time somebody throws something at you, you know, when they make a choice, you have to accept it. That's the only rule in improv. If I'm in a scene with you, Saad, and you say, hey, we're on Mars, then we're on Mars. I don't get to change the location. You deal with what has been given you and you build from that. So for me, I always view short form video as it's not a one-way street. It's not like theater. In theater, the audience is up here on stage or the audience is down here and the performers are up on stage and never shall the two meet. For video content, for social content, that is an eye-to-eye performance. you and your audience are on the same level. And I'm always surveying my audience. I'm always asking them questions. I'm always interacting with content from other players in the space. I'm always crowdsourcing ideas. And that's so I can always start with this idea of truth. I'm starting with something that they believe in true. I'm starting with something that they will recognize as real, a real problem, a real solution, a real situation that they might find themselves in. And the whole Chicago approach to comedy is to play it completely sincerely. Give the audience something more honest than they realize, and in the honesty, in the truth, in the authenticity, that's where the real comedy comes from. And, it's this idea of like if you've ever watched Saturday Night Live, a lot of the most famous characters that have ever been created were somebody doing an impression of their dad. And what the teach you to do at Second City is you start with that real thing and you take one aspect of it and you just exaggerate it to comic proportions and you play the rest of the scene straight. And you never really know where it's going to go, but as long as you follow that rule of telling the truth, that's all you need. And there is a tendency in B2B to overstate the effectiveness of our solutions. There's a tendency to solve for the problem we wish users were having instead of the problems that they're actually having. And I find if you go out there and you really are honest with yourself about what does this situation truly feel like? Can I create some sort of scenario where you watch for 3 seconds and the audience goes, oh, that's me. This is the scene about me. I have been that. Drives me nuts when people have done. I've been in a situation 100 times. Then all of a sudden, they're 3 seconds into the video. They don't know who you are. They don't know that your solution is good for them, but you've pulled them into the story. Now they want to see where it goes because they've identified with this viewpoint that they're seeing, and they're saying, okay, well, this is what I believe. Let's see where it takes me. And, that's the trick of comedy is you always want to surprise them. You want to take them somewhere they don't expect themselves to go. But unless you start with that truth, it's going to ring hollow. And I find in B2B, oftentimes they don't do this critical section of talking to their potential users, having interviews, qualitative research. They just jump straight to I'll ask ChatGPT, what are the 3 most common problems that my audience has? And what do you know? Everybody winds up with the exact same value add, which is we're going to save you time and money, which is nice, but it's a very surface level understanding of the problem. And comedy allows you to go somewhere deeper.
Okay, so obviously, let's just build on this. Okay, so B2B world is all about metrics, numbers, and automations and all of that. Okay, so you've been a part of it, right? What metrics would you sort of recommend for this approach? And how would you calculate the ROI if you had to present it to board?
So at the very least, it's efficient to be out there with content. If you have to sell this from a numbers standpoint, and I was a sales guy for most of my life, and I started doing video content, and I realized this is way more efficient. I can get seen by so many more people if I go out into the newsfeed and do something that really captures people's imaginations. And, I'm not just making this up. I survey my audience a lot. When I started my own business, I was not doing any comedy. I was on a 3-year dry spell. I had not done comedy in a long time. COVID shut down a lot of the theaters. The comedy started creeping its way in. I would be talking to the audience about cold calling or cold emailing, things that B2B companies love, right? Because those are the most efficient in quotes. Think about how many hours a cold caller spends not reaching anybody. Think of how many SDRs get laid off in fewer than 6 months. That's not efficient. So yeah, I started originally, I was making these kind of talking heads B2B videos, and then the comedy started creeping in, And, I would be talking about cold calling. It would cut to a different scene where there was a very nervous version of me on the phone, talking to a much more impatient version of me. And we were doing like a mock cold call, and it would go somewhere unexpected and it would be funny. And those were the ones that got me more inbounds. And like a good B2B marketer, I ended up surveying my network, and overwhelmingly, I discovered that it did not matter the level of seniority of the person. When I asked them what it was that they found valuable about the content, they all said they loved the comedy. They wanted more of that. Whatever that cutaway was where you were on the phone, we want to see more of that. And to this day, I still do. I still do cold calling. I still do cold emailing. I still do all the traditional methods of outreach. And the content, overwhelmingly, the inbounds are what really performs for me. You spend a lot of time chasing people around, trying to outwit them, trying to outthink them when you're doing this cold call, cold email kind of setup. But when you're creating content that people feel connected to, they feel it's honest, they feel it rings true to their experience, they find you. It serves as the magnet and it pulls them in. And, my answer to, a B2B company that thinks it's not efficient is like, they're not really judging it by the same standards of calling and emailing. It's a newer thing. It's a thing that they don't have. Again, if you go get an MBA, they're not going to teach you how to make sketch comedy videos on TikTok, right?
Okay.
And if one of these companies do try it, typically what they do is they try for a couple months. If they don't see the results immediately, they say, this isn't working, let's fire everybody and let's double down on the cold calls and cold emails. But I would challenge anybody who's in that mindset to think ahead. Take a look at what's happening to our cell phones. Take a look at what's happening to Google. Every year, Google is finding new ways to cut out the spam. They're finding ways to make sure that if an unidentified number calls your phone, it doesn't even ring. It says likely spam caller on it. Do you really think that's going to work forever? Like, do you really think we're entering an era where people are going to pick up the phone more often rather than less? I don't think we are. And more importantly, and I think this may be the big one that everybody in B2B is missing, how old are the SDRs on your team? And are they actually hitting those dial and email metrics? I mean, you can answer, how old are they typically?
Mid-20s? Mid-20s?
Yeah. This generation that is graduating right now, they do not use the phone. They were not raised like you and I were. They were not raised like my parents were. In my parents' generation, the phone was an amazing thing. You would fight with your siblings for access to the phone. You would fight with your parents. You could be on the phone with your friends all night. That was a thing they looked forward to. That is not who's making the cold calls. And, these B2B companies, they blame the generation. There's something wrong with this generation that they don't like the phone. And I'm like, yeah, this generation was raised by you. They were raised by the Mark Zuckerbergs, of the world, who said, hey, the smartphone, video content, YouTube, this is going to be the future. And that's the skills that these kids picked up. And instead of sitting around getting angry that they don't know how to use the phone, I'm like, why don't you learn how to use a camera? These kids already have YouTube skills. You give a 23-year-old person a phone and say, go make a 30-second video, she knows her angle. They know exactly where to put it. So they're framed nicely and the sun is hitting them perfectly. They know how to do all the edits. They don't have B2B jobs that are built for those kinds of processes. We're trying to put them in this box that made sense for us. And this is the different generation in a different world with different expectations. And we should really be looking ahead to the future instead of trying to pull them into the past.
Okay, that's awesome. So I would assume that you will try multiple angles. So you will bring this kind of creative angle, then this kind of creative angle, this kind of... Do you use dollar budgets to sort of like validate which angle works better? What is the optimal length and all of that? Do you have any guidance for that?
It depends on the size of the organization. I am working with all sorts of different organizations, and obviously the more assets you have behind something like this, the better it's going to do. It's not a bad idea to hire on a full-time editor. That is the thing where it's like, it doesn't cost that much money. But if you're trying to do this in-house, expecting your team to write and shoot and edit and distribute the content, that's a lot of work for one person. If you've ever watched a movie and you stick around for the credits, I mean, how many thousands of people does it take to get one of these movies out there? And then they're just like, oh, okay, we're going to try video. Let's have an intern do it and hope for the best, and even if you're going down the route of paid, media, if you're going to be like doing paid ads or something like that, your best bet is to go with something that performed well organically. And again, that doesn't just happen out of nowhere. That takes planning and time and budget. That takes skills. And unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that B2B companies view as unserious. So they say, oh, you know what? If you want to make creative stuff for the newsfeed, you can do that before work or after work, or you could do that on the weekends. And you actually have to treat it with the seriousness of anything else you're doing in your B2B company. So yeah, it's going to take budget. You're going to have to ideally pay for people who know what they're doing, and you're going to have to give them a framework that allows them to focus almost exclusively on creative content. But you'll notice, like, the companies who've really embraced it, they're not going back. The companies that embrace it, they find success with it, and they tend, to double down on it. Because you are able to reach a certain type of buyer that is oftentimes just not accessible through calls and emails.
Okay, so this data part obviously is easier part, numbers and data. Then comes the creativity, the artist part. How do you have any sort of like recommendation, any techniques? How can this creativity be infused within a company? Is it possible, or is it individuals?
I would say if you're looking for talent, you're going to have to find a more creative type person. It's not like there is any shortage of these out there, but I often tell people that anything you see me doing on LinkedIn with video that has made me successful, I did not learn from LinkedIn. I learned by working with filmmakers, working with, TikTokers and YouTube influencers and Instagrammers, and these people are out there, but that's not who LinkedIn, or that's not who B2B companies think to put in charge of these processes. And there's this fundamental thing I keep coming back to, which is that, like, you have to be able to surprise the audience. You have to be able to give them something they don't expect. And that means, you might have to bring in a different type of personality. But, I feel like I learned more about how to make successful creative content by watching old Bugs Bunny cartoons than I have from going on LinkedIn and reading what B2B marketers tell me, because they're all going to tell you the same things. They're telling you the same things that they've been telling you for the past 10 years. And that's why all their stuff ends up looking the same. And really what you want to do is you want to figure out, what is the pattern that everybody expects, and how can I find a creative way to break the pattern? Human beings, we survive by being able to identify patterns. And as social animals, we have evolved to be able to identify the thing that does not fit the pattern. You think language, you think about a caveman living back in the Stone Age. We survive because we are able to look at the bush and identify that one red berry sticking out, and know that that's the thing we're supposed to pluck off and eat. So B2B marketers often will teach you how to look exactly like every other B2B marketer out there. The creative stuff that works is when you find an artful way to break that pattern. So the audience goes, wait a minute, I know where this is supposed to go, and that's not supposed to happen. That disruption is what gets them to stop. And then ideally, if you've got strong storytelling fundamentals, you can take them somewhere from there. But that requires good writing skills and, frankly, good acting skills, which, again, they're not going to teach you how to be an actor if you go get an MBA. They're just not.
So what's your take on generative AI and all of this stuff? So like, can this happen? Like, okay, these are the faces and these are the scripts, and create something which is like SML episode this. Is this something which is going to happen down the road with this B2B content?
No.
No?
I don't think so. I don't think
Okay.
so. My position on generative AI is that there's a lot of things that generative AI can do. What it cannot do is surprise us. The day AI starts surprising us, we're in trouble. That's the end of the world, right? What the AI can do is you put in the inputs and then it'll give you an output. It's not supposed to have surprises in there. It's supposed to give you exactly what you want. And that's an advantage that human beings have over AI. AI can show you what everybody else is doing. You need to be able to take it one step further and like subvert that story. And AI is just not designed to do that. So that's my answer on that. But we can go deeper on that if you want. I'm actually having a debate with somebody about this week.
Oh, okay. Okay. So let's consider this fact. Okay, all the marketers end up ruining all of these mechanisms and channels. Okay, email marketing would have a huge conversion rate, then it drops. Your Facebook ads will have huge conversion rates, it drops. LinkedIn will have it, then it drops. Do you also believe that everybody will be doing all of this and then eventually this will drop?
No. I don't believe everybody's going to be doing this. At least not yet. Again, this might look different. Maybe when Gen Z, maybe once they're at the VP level, this is just going to be common. And instead of a team of SDRs, you're going to have a team of creators serving a similar function. But this element of surprise, like, it's always going to work. And if everybody starts doing the creative video content thing, then you could send somebody a telegram. You can do kind of like guerrilla stunts out in public. Like, anytime there's a pattern, there's some sort of way to subvert the pattern. And generative AI is always going to be looking for what have people already done in the past. And the challenge of marketers is already going to be, how can we do something that, sometimes the things I do are things that are done in the past. You read through human history, there were wandering minstrels and bards and acting troupes and, all sorts of groups of artists all over the world. This is not, in some ways, there's nothing new under the sun that you can do. But, yeah, I guess for me, it's like I'm never just bound by the news feed. It's funny. I was just had I was editing one of my podcast episodes, and I had Tim Davidson on, who he's a pretty popular LinkedIn content creator. He's done a lot of interesting video content, and we did a little experiment with the comments. We decided to make a comedy sketch, and instead of having it in the news feed, we put it into the comments. And it was a crazy idea. We had a fake comedy sketch in the newsfeed that stops halfway through, and it's like, if you want the full comedy sketch, go into the comments, and it's in the comments. And yeah, it was funny because it ended up, if you looked at the analytics from the video in the comments, it was like my lowest performing video ever. But someone screenshotted it and put it in a YouTube video that reached almost 1 million people. And we got a huge turnout for our live event that week, which, that's a lead magnet I use to generate new business for me and new business for my guests. It ended up working out really well. But again, that was because we recognized what the pattern was, and we found a creative way to break the pattern. And, anytime there's a new thing, people are very quickly going to learn what it is and try to copy it. And yeah, I guess that's the thing I keep coming back to, is anytime there's a pattern, someone's going to figure out how to break the pattern. And that's the story of marketing. You're always catching up. The instant everybody catches on to the same thing, it's no longer as effective. And I feel generative AI is the same way. The companies that caught on to it early maybe did get an advantage out of it, but now it seems very obvious to me. I can tell the companies that are out there with, AI generated marketing content, they think there's no way to spot an AI generated image or AI generated copy, but oftentimes it is pretty obvious that this is not a human being. It's, again, there's a predictability about it that is inherent. A generative AI is just like, no matter what you're doing, it's essentially like a autocorrect in a smartphone, where it's guessing what the next word is going to be. And that means it's always looking at like, what is the most popular thing? What is the most predictable thing to come next? So if you're always able to figure out how to zag while others are zigging, you can always find a way to stand out as a marketer.
So to me, it seems like maybe this kind of content is leading to word of mouth eventually. Do you agree with that or no?
A world of what?
Word of mouth marketing. This eventually.
Yeah, I would. Hasn't that always been the point of marketing though, to drive word of mouth? Like, I don't know. It's interesting because you look at what's happening at a large scale, like in advertising. I got a lot of negative opinions about advertising, but I'm talking to you as we're recording this episode. The Super Bowl is coming up this weekend. You'll notice a pattern with the Super Bowl. The pattern is take a bunch of unrelated celebrities or nostalgic celebrities that used to be famous, throw them into a crazy situation where there's CGI and explosions and zaniness, and see what happens. And the reason why all those commercials feel the same is because when you are advertising to a group that large and that diverse, you only have so many options. Whereas I think kind of the joy of B2B is your audience is much smaller, and I think what ends up happening is you get the chance to make something that may be smarter or more intelligent than the audience is expecting, because you don't have to please everybody. You're going after a very small number of buyers. So I actually think what's just happening is, the message is getting smaller and smaller. We're getting better at targeting small numbers of groups rather than having to make one thing that's going to go viral and get 6 million people to click on it. The human attention span is just fractured and, dissected in a smaller way than it ever has been before. And, that makes some people nervous, but from a creative standpoint, it gives you a lot more freedom.
Okay, so you now consider the situation. You have a CFO and you have this white paper or case study, which is like a middle of funnel kind of a material. How would you balance the creative, the humor part, and the actual information that is in there?
Yeah, I would think about that white paper not as one piece of content, but I would think of it as fuel for like 20 pieces of content. So anytime I am creating any sort of marketing asset, I am thinking into the future and like, what are, different ways I can get this in front of my audience. So you've got a white paper, you could make a piece of short form content that pushes people to that. You could take a section of that and create a video based on that. You can create an ongoing series about the concepts in that white paper where you like push people to go download it. Every piece of content I make, I'm always thinking of like, how can I get the most out of this? And I think actually the problem with the white paper is like, people will spend a lot of time creating them. They will spend a lot of time making sure that they have very accurate information. And then nobody reads it. Nobody downloads it. So my thing is not like, hey, let's never write white papers anymore. It's more like, okay, so that white paper is full of information that is ostensibly important to your audience, how can we let them know that? Like, how can we get them to take this journey where they discover that this is something that they want? And the thing that always happens with me, whether I am doing private coaching, whether I am consulting with a company on like their demand gen strategy, or I'm launching a team of content creators or something, I spend the most time on the first 3 seconds of any video. The first 3 seconds of the video is do or die. That is where either people are going to stop and continue watching your message, or they're going to scroll past, and the algorithm is going to determine, hey, this is low value content, we're not going to show it to people. So that white paper may have very important information in it. How can you show that to the audience within 3 seconds when they might not otherwise be inclined to check it out? And that sounds really difficult at first. 3 seconds doesn't sound like a lot of time, but once you actually get deep into this, you realize that video gives you more tools than any other medium. It is the visuals on screen, it is sound effects, it is images, it is text, it is music, it is mood, it is emotion. So yeah, actually, there are so many more tools to capture somebody's attention that you just don't have in something like a white paper. So yeah, that's my answer to that, is like, maybe it's not a question of white paper versus video, but more a question of like, can you really expand your idea of like how the white paper should be attracting new eyes?
That's awesome. So you've talked about different tools. You said, okay, video is very comprehensive. It carries so many elements. How would you compare the video performance versus a meme, which is very Gen Z, or an image with some creative copy? So have you seen which one works better? Or is it like video all the time outperforms everything?
Memes are powerful. Sometimes a meme is better than a video. A meme I think of as an inside joke. The memes are the inside jokes of the internet. And a meme works on that same principle of pattern disruption, where you're taking the familiar thing, but you're switching one aspect of it. And the audience likes it because they're like, oh, I didn't think of that, but I could have thought of that, I would say a video can just go deeper than a meme. A meme is like a one-off joke, whereas video is often more of story. And a lot of what I am teaching people on video is nonverbal. I do a lot of teaching about like, how do you look at the camera? How do you make eye contact with the camera? And oftentimes it's these little human elements. The HD cameras pick up a lot. They pick up a lot of nuance, right? Especially movement of the eyes, movements of the mouth. They can catch these little subtleties about human beings. So it is denser. There is more room to play. And also, you need your audience to slow down in order to interact with the video, right? It requires the biggest commitment from your audience. It's not like a meme where they can just look at it for 2 seconds and hit the like button. If you want to get someone to watch the entire video, you've really got to take them on a journey. Every 3 to 5 seconds is a new moment, and you've got to pull them from moment to moment to moment. So because it is more work on the audience's part, you're probably going to reach a smaller audience, but you're going to reach them more deeply than you would something like a meme, which can be effective, but is also more surface level.
Okay. So I'm assuming that we've talked a lot of these short form videos for LinkedIn. Okay, but there are other channels. Like you have this YouTube where people are uploading 3-hour long content, and you Uberman, everybody's listening to it, like for 3-hour long piece of content. So do you have any comments for that, or do you sort of suggest that B2B will all the comedy and all of it in short form within specific to LinkedIn, and that's it?
Yeah, your long form content has to be able to be turned into short form content too. You look at any sort of successful long form content. I mean, the big one that everybody knows is Joe Rogan, right? Because he's the most popular podcaster on Spotify. Does Joe Rogan have a lot of people who listen to those long form episodes? Yes. Short form video still plays a huge role in that. It's all about the clips afterwards that go viral. Anybody who has been doing podcasting for a long time, you've seen over these past few years, it doesn't just end with the long form podcast. They are clipping it into short vertical videos, and they're putting those videos on YouTube Shorts, on TikTok, on Instagram. Again, I don't look at this as an either or thing. I don't look at it like, oh, we're going to do long form video, so we're not going to do short form. I look at it more like, we're going to do long form video, so what's our plan to also turn that into short form? Because again, you got to think of the commitment level of your audience. Are you a person that already has a huge audience and they're already willing to sit down and listen to you for 2 hours? Okay, maybe then you can go in an entirely long form strategy. But even then, you kind of gotta make room for both. I'm gonna have the long form video for people who are already invested and already know I'm willing to spend 2 hours of my time listening to this person talk. But I plan segments during the long form video. And this is another thing too. I don't just coach short form video. Companies coach me. I help them launch long form shows, podcasts. This is something I do regularly, but we're always thinking forward. How can we have moments within the show? Maybe it's a fast, question and answer session. Maybe it's some sort of like change of pace where it becomes a little bit more humorous, or like it becomes like, faster or something like that. But I always plan, like, let's have moments within that long form segment that we can easily turn into short form clips, because you're going to be getting a different audience. And again, you think about it in terms of like, okay, the people that I need to reach oftentimes don't know that they have a problem. They don't see the value in this. They're not willing to sacrifice 2 hours of their time to consume this message. Can I challenge myself to earn 3 seconds of their time? Because if I can earn those 3 seconds, I can get them to watch for a minute. And if I get them to watch for a minute, I can get them to subscribe. And if they subscribe, I can get them to all these other places. But if you can't get them in for that initial 3 seconds, you're not going to get them. And it's pretty cutthroat getting those first 3 seconds once you get out there and start doing this. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It takes a lot of time and planning to be able to go do things short.
Yeah, so obviously one way to learn about all of this is to go through your videos and get some of the inspiration. But if somebody wants to follow somebody for like 6 months and read some books also on this topic, do you have any suggestions which can sort of like take them to the journey and they're going to work from now?
There's no way to do it other than to try it yourself and fail at it for a while. There are people out there who do great stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube and TikTok. There is something to be said about authenticity, and the exercise that I give people is I tell them, okay, go scroll through your own feed and ask yourself, what videos are you watching? What grabs your attention? What are they doing? Go ahead and watch a creator, spend some time on TikTok. And if you like a video, sit down and watch it. And, you can just kind of observe the things you're doing. And, this idea of the first 3 seconds, go break down a video and just watch the first 3 seconds and take note of what they're doing. And you start to notice these things. You notice, oh, you know what? The second I watch it, there's some sort of movement happening. There's some sort of movement and there's something on the screen, and the person has some sort of strong emotion that they're committing to, and there's a level of self-awareness needed that I think a lot of people don't have, because I think, frankly, a lot of people are self-conscious about the way they look, the way they sound. They're like, I don't like watching myself on video. I don't like hearing my own voice. But if you really sit down and honestly compare yourself to the stuff that is doing better than you, you can usually find things in your own performance that you are doing wrong. And this has happened so many times with me. I'll make a video, I will spend days on it. I am trying to make the greatest thing ever, and it fails. And I'll go watch it, and I'll go, you know what? The first 3 seconds were not exciting enough. I did not pull you into the story quick enough. If they had stuck around for 5 seconds, maybe I could have got them, because at the 5-second mark, it gets so much more compelling. But that's not enough time for someone scrolling through their phone. They watch you for 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, and if something doesn't grab them, they just keep on scrolling. So, but yeah, you kind of got to put yourself in the audience's seat and think like, would this catch me?
Okay, so in terms of building a team for it, I mean, I can think of one strategy is I bring in these best TikTokers and these Gen Z guys who understand all of these angles, the right camera angles and all of that. Give them some sort of specs and just get out of the way. Is that the best way, or do you want this to be like an in-house production? Let's just find somebody within the organization and get them to that particular level.
I mean, I guess it depends on your organization. I think this stuff tends to be better in-house because you've got different audiences that you're playing to, and different audiences are receptive to different kinds of things, so oftentimes your audience wants to see a storyteller that reminds them of themselves. So, if you are trying to reach a diverse audience, a younger audience, and it's only your head of marketing on video, and it's a 50-year-old white guy, maybe it's going to resonate with the 50-year-old white guys, but that's basically it. To me, I always look at video. There's so many different kinds of video, but there's always 2 kinds of video that any company can do. And those 2 kinds of videos are, 1, this is who we are. And 2 is, this is the problem we solve. So, but this is who we are. You can talk about your organization. You can talk about the people. You can talk about your values. Why are you different? Why do you see the world differently? That you can always make content about that, no matter who you are. And then the second one is like, here's the problem that we solve. There are an infinite number of ways to do either of those. And sometimes you're going to have to experiment. Because again, sometimes people want something that's more entertaining. They want something that's a little bit more surprising. They want something that's a little bit more fun. Maybe they want to tap into like a more youthful audience. Or, maybe you've got just the opposite. Maybe you've got a more traditional audience. Maybe they want to see that you're a little bit more traditional too. Maybe, having leadership up there or having somebody that reminds them of themselves, maybe that's the way to go. I would just say that like the difference between Gen Z and the generations that came before them is video is a more casual thing for Gen Z. Every time I talk to somebody who is older, when you're getting especially into your 40s and 50s and 60s, they think of video as like, I gotta have the perfect lights, and I gotta be dressed perfectly, and my hair's gotta be perfect, and I gotta have makeup, and we've gotta have all these professional cuts. Whereas for Gen Z, it's much more casual. Again, this is what they did to hang out growing up. They'd sit there on FaceTime. They don't even talk to each other on FaceTime. They turn on FaceTime and they set it on their desk and it faces up at the ceiling. Their bosses can't imagine doing something like that, So yeah, it's almost like you want to give them like exclusive access. You want to make your audience feel like they're part of something that's just for them. And yeah, again, I think this is just like a gap between the generations where if you grew up with YouTube, you get it. If YouTube came out after you already became an adult, you've got a different understanding of video than most of the people out there making videos today.
Okay, so you're suggesting a house. So if somebody has to set up a team, what is like the minimum viable team that you're looking at? Like, what should be like there for there to start churning out this kind of content?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not quite sure I understand.
So the minimum viable team. So do you need somebody with a camera skills? Do you need somebody with a scripting skills and for post editing? What do you suggest is like the ideal setup for this kind of producing this kind of content?
Yeah, so you can definitely just use your phone. I mean, that's the thing is like, again, I've got a lot of friends who are people who've, built multi-million-dollar empires on YouTube and TikTok content. I'll talk to my friends. They've got a $15,000 camera sitting there in the studio, and they tell me, hey, this is the camera I use to make most of my content. I pay for the Adobe suite. I pay for the Adobe, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe After Effects, because I'm one of those nerds. If you get CapCut, which is the app that most people use to edit TikTok videos, that is a free app on your phone, and it can do a lot of crazy editing things that look very impressive if you don't know how to do them. So I'd say, yeah, you can actually start with, if you have a talented person who maybe they've already got a TikTok that they're good at or a YouTube that they're good at, you could start this as a one-person thing, but you should give them expectations. And again, it's like, I feel like the whole reason why I'm out there doing this is because there's a disconnect where you do have to go talk about things that are relevant to your audience. And, if you're a 22-year-old on TikTok, you might not understand, like if you're selling financial technology, you might not really understand what it is that your audience is looking for. You need both of those. I just feel like what's happening now is mostly you've got a lot of old school B2B bosses. Maybe they let their team try doing something creative for a couple months. And then if they don't immediately see returns, they just kind of double down on white papers, cold calling, cold emailing, all the things that they've done before. And the reality is you're going to have to experiment. Again, that's kind of the fundamental flaw of needing to surprise your audience. It's hard to do, and you got to be unexpected. You gotta be willing to try weird things. Success is not always going to be guaranteed. I do a live show. I have sponsors from my live show, and I always tell them the same thing, which is I can't guarantee you that any of these episodes are going to go viral. I can't guarantee you that you're going to be sponsoring the episode that gets 1 million views. I don't always knock it out of the park. What I will tell you is sometimes I do knock it out of the park. Sometimes I do. I hit that secret sauce. It's a huge hit. It blows up. You get a ton of people seeing it. That's why you need to be in for the long haul, because this is a game of consistency. It's a game of going out there and trying things. You have to be willing to invest time in it, just like you're willing to invest time and money into, hiring 30% more cold callers than you need, because you're going to be cutting a third of your team, every 6 months, because that's just the way that B2B companies go. They've priced some level of failure into the sales organization, and you have to be willing to do that with content too. But that's not something B2B companies are really doing, because again, that's not what they're comfortable with. They are much more comfortable with the sales processes they already know. They'd rather just let an intern try to do creative for a couple months, and then if it doesn't work, they go, must be our people. We must not be selling to video people. But everybody's a video person because everybody's got a phone.
Okay, that's good. That's awesome. I guess we've covered everything. Anything that we missed out? Or do you want to add anything?
No, if I can plug my stuff, I'll plug my stuff. But other than that.
Okay. I truly enjoyed it. I mean, this was something we have tinkered it with a bit with the needs and everything. And I felt like there's something to it, and the market is not there yet. Mm-hmm. So this is very, very interesting, and I really learned a lot, enjoyed a lot, to be honest. I think you might see something from Xgrid happening down the road.
Yeah,
obviously not from me, but I'm like I'm not the kind of person, but somebody from the team.
Yeah, well, I'm curious. You said you learned some things. Was there anything you could think of off the top of your head that kind of jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think so. there's 3 second rule. Obviously, know all of it, but like the way you put it, you sort of mentioned how important it is. I think that sort of like really strikes out for me, like right now. And also like doing it in house, I think that is also a sort of a value add. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff. To be honest, I need to process all of it.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad you had me on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So have an amazing day. We'll talk soon.